asked me a question this morning. And there's a lot of things in the Bible. Sometimes what the Bible doesn't say is very important, you know. What the Bible doesn't say is real important. And what it says is real important. And sometimes you read between the lines and look at things. For instance, God, I told you here a while back, and I've said this a long time, but sometimes it just dawns on you. I've said for many years that God created Adam. He created Adam not from dust, but as dust. And then He placed him in the garden. I created him outside the garden, placed him in the garden. He created him outside the garden so that Adam could see what was out there in the world that he was supposed to guard the garden against. And then He placed him in this paradise. All right? And He told him some things. Now I'm going to drop one more little jewel on you today, okay? Because I think you're ready for this one. All right? This will give you something to think about for about the next 20 years or something. God placed Adam in that garden. He told him to guard it. And there was two trees in that garden that were very important, weren't they? Two of them.
Yeah.
Two trees that were very important. Who can name the two trees?
The tree of life and the tree of knowledge.
The tree of life and the tree of knowledge. Now just remember that. The tree of knowledge. One, you can eat it, partake of it, and gain something. And the other one, if you didn't partake of it, you gained it. How much did Adam know? How much knowledge did Adam have?
Quite a bit.
All of it.
A whole lot.
I think.
If he had not partaken of that tree of the knowledge of knowledge, let's just call it the tree of knowledge, not the knowledge of good and evil, but the tree of knowledge. If he had not partaken of that tree of knowledge, would he have had knowledge?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was right on the way, wasn't he? All right. He would have had the knowledge of evil. Where was he created? Remember where he was created? Outside the garden, placed in paradise. Well, when he was created outside the garden, do you think that he knew what he was supposed to guard his wife from? And the rest of the universe, really, in all reality? Do you think that he knew what he was supposed to guard it from? Did he have knowledge of evil?
Yeah. I would have told him.
What? Yeah, he did. He had knowledge of evil. He had knowledge that it was there. But he hadn't committed it yet. The command was, do not partake of the knowledge of the tree of knowledge. But by not partaking of the tree of knowledge, he would have had knowledge. But in the right order. That's the difference.
In the right perspective.
And the right perspective. One he was to gain without touching it, without partaking of it. And the other, in the tree of life, he was to gain by partaking of it. He would gain the same amount of both things. Does it get better? as you go further in the Word of God, does it? Just think about that for a while. How many of you ever looked at it that way?
I'll tell you, a way to look at it is, we criticize Adam for falling, we criticize Eve for falling, partaking of this tree. We picture it as an apple on a tree, a delicious thing. But if you picture the garden as our life, and you picture the temptation right in the middle of our lives, and do we partake of it? Do we switch on to pornography on the intercom or whatever you call it? But the thing is that this thing that's right in the middle of our life, whether it's aggravation in a traffic thing, it's a temptation. If we don't partake of that, then we will have this knowledge. And if we partake of the things in the Bible, of God's Word, we would have this. Similarly, the two trees there. But it's right in the, not in the middle of the garden, but it's in the middle of our lives. All this.
Well, it is. We go through that temptation in all of our lives, just like Adam did. And many times we succumb to it. But let me tell you this also. If a man could be born and live a perfect life all his life, would that be enough?
No.
Why?
The original sin is on him.
The original sin he's still guilty of. So it's the what is the only payment?
Christ.
Christ. God had to become flesh in time and space at a period of time in history. God had to become flesh to redeem us from that debt. That's absolutely necessary.
To fulfill his timeless, eternal purpose.
God is God's eternal purpose to fulfill that. And then, and is man related to that redemption? Huh? Is man related? Are you related to the redemption?
Yeah.
Yes.
Sir.
Yes,
Well, it's like you said, Christ will always be a man.
that's right.
He was God, but he will all for
Well,
eternity.
from now on, he will always be man too. Now just think, back in the garden. Go back to the garden, because these trees are going to be there again, aren't they? Huh?
We're in Revelation.
Yeah, go look at it. All right, here we have the tree of life again. Adam, the tree of life had fruit on it, didn't it? The book of Revelation tells you about that tree of life. What kind of, let's gather up some Bible knowledge here now.
The tree of life in Revelation 22.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, it has,
You're going on that today?
that's what we're doing today.
All right.
I have it.
Okay.
It has 12 different kinds of fruit.
12 kinds of fruit, according to the 12 kairos of the year. Not kairos, seasons.
Seasons. See? Good thing you wrote that up there. Isn't it? And each
Seven-
month it produces a different fruit.
That's right. And here it is. Now, he could have partaken of that fruit in the Garden of Eden, in the paradise of God. The paradise, the heavenly estate where God and man had communion. Did they not? Because of love, a man marries a woman, and they become one, and they have little children of that love that bonds them closer together. Huh? Okay, that's supposed to be the way it happens. And that little child is a product of what? Love. Now God created man, didn't he? Now, when Adam and Eve had their first child, what did Eve say? By the way, her name means living. Okay, that's what her name means, living. Eve means living. Now, she should have been the mother of all dying, because all of us would die, but he looked upon it as the mother of the Savior. Okay? So they had a child, and she said, I have created, or we have created a man like God created us. She was so excited. My wife tells me she just, her whole desire when through life was to get married and have a little baby and hold this baby in her arms. This is what she wanted in life. She wanted to have a little baby. Hello, brother. She wanted to create a baby. Now, when God created man, he created man out of love. Now, when you create, now Adam and Eve, when Eve says, I created man, and then she says, even the Lord. This was, she thought Cain was the Messiah. She thought he was the Messiah. I have created man, even the Lord. She had created him, and he was in their image, wasn't he? Now, when God created man, guess what he did? Was man a product of God's love? Through mankind, God was going to redeem the universe back to himself. And mankind will have a tremendous part in that redemption. Because Christ came through man. All right, God forever is related to man when he became flesh. John 1:1. I've told you this 1,000 times. In the beginning, kept on being the Word, and the Word there means Jehovah, he who shall become. And that Jehovah kept on being an inseparable part of the Godhead. That's what the second part of that verse says. And it says, and that Word, that Jehovah, kept on being God all the time he was on this earth. And when God became flesh, John 1:14, and Kai Ho Logos and the word sarx, flesh, agenitos. He became. That's the fulfillment of that Jehovah title. That word became there, third person singular. And it's a him too. He became, and it's aorist tense. What does that mean? You scholars, punctiliar action, one time. All right? Punctiliar action. Middle voice.
For himself.
For himself. He did it for himself. God became flesh for himself. Now God so loved mankind and the universe. Now John 3:16. What does 3:16 say? John 3:16. Come on, everybody knows that verse.
For God so loved the world.
For God so loved the cosmos, the whole world order, the whole creation, that he gave his only begotten Son. Now God created man. If you go back in the book of Matthew and in Luke, you read this here, you find out that Adam, it says that his father was God. He was his maker. Like we make our children. God made us in his image. He loved mankind so much. Before he ever made mankind, he loved mankind so much that he made him in his pre-incarnate image. We studied a lot of things this morning. All right? God created man on the outside of the garden so he could see the devilment. He placed him in the garden and he told him to guard it. All right? He had the tree of knowledge and the tree of life. And we see all of this. It should all come together. The tree of knowledge, he was supposed to gain knowledge by not eating of it. Yes. He was supposed to gain knowledge by not eating of it. And the tree of life, he would partake of that and of the 12 fruits of it. All right. Now here we have this beloved crowning creation of Jehovah God that he made in his image. Adam. Okay? You bring forth your children. How many of you love your children? I mean, sometimes they're not very lovable, but you love them anyway, don't you? Huh?
Yeah.
Husbands aren't lovable sometimes, aren't they? But you love them. And wives, you know, they're just wonderful all the time.
All the time.
She should love me.
And you love them. Your children sometimes are bad, aren't they? But you always love them. God created mankind, and here is his child, his baby, so to speak. And this baby is made in his image. And through this child, he is going to, I mean, he wasn't a baby when he was born, but I mean, symbolically teaching. And through mankind, God would bring the universe back into unity and harmony with himself. We got some goodies over here, by the way.
You know, Jim, when you're talking about the unity and harmony of God and God's creation, and when he created us in his image, he created us 5 or 6 feet tall. But this has in physics a relation to the entire solar system. If the sun had been larger, if the Earth had been greater, gravitational pull, and we could talk a long time on how the order is just so.
That's what you call physics.
Yep.
In physics is an absolute law of the universe that God placed. I don't know how a physicist could possibly study physics of what we call physical science and not see the Creator. Because everything that God did, how He created, your eyeballs are just the right size. Did you know that? And your ears and your feet and everything about you is just right. And it relates to the whole universe. It does. It relates to the whole. It's not man. And just think about it for a minute. Man, what is man that God is mindful of him? The psalmist said. What is man that God was mindful of him? The Son of Man. But through mankind, God was going to bring the whole universe back into harmony with Himself, because He would be forever related to man when He would become flesh. Inseparable. Inseparable. Think about that. Brother Lee said something a while ago. He said, God what? Could you repeat that? Because that was worth repeating.
God's eternal purpose.
God's eternal purpose, but in space and time, God became flesh, and that He will
Always be
part of mankind. Inseparable. Why did He do that? God is agapeo. Agapeo. He is love. He did that to share the universe with you. That's why. Now, God didn't need you, did He? God doesn't need anything to exist. But God, in His will, that word is philamatos. In Ephesians, it tells, somebody turn to the book of Ephesians, walk with me. Ephesians, the first chapter. God created man triune. He created him mind, like Himself. He created him in the mind you have reason to. And He created him what? In His physical likeness. And what else? The Lamatos. God, when He creates anything and whatever He does with the universe, it is His what right? Sovereign right. And that's He has a will. Balima, His will. It is His will. And God gave man the absolute dangerous gift of freedom. Let's look at this. Paulos apostles Christus dia theomatos agios who's in Ephesus. That's how it starts off. Paul the apostle, one sent out from God. All right? Out an apostle by Jesus Christ through the theomatos, to the spiritual activating force. That's what that word theomatos means. That's that word will. That's that word volition. What was the spiritual activating force in the creation of man? Love. So He wanted to share. He decided to share the universe with His child. What do you leave in this world when you leave it? Children. Children. That's all. If you have children, you leave children. That's all you leave, isn't it? And God tells us to raise our children in the way that they should go. You're going to turn them loose on the world when you leave. You do, don't you? Good or bad. I used to tell my boys, you don't straighten out and knock your head and make another one. I'm not going to turn you loose on the world like that. You better be good citizens. Well, I wouldn't really have done that, but I wanted to make them think that. Kept them in line a little better. Maybe. God tells us to train our children in the ways that they should go. Because every one of the little dudes has got a theomatos, a spiritual activating force. And sometimes that spiritual activating force comes from the dark region. Have anybody in this room ever not had a bad thought or a bad intuition about to go do something bad? That's the Irish coming out in this one. Yes.
All their fault.
I tell my wife. That's the devil's who it is. The devil. What is the word? Here we have, he had a high and holy name to begin with, didn't he? Lucifer, which meant light carrier in Hebrew. And the Bible calls him Satanos. We get our word Satan from it. What does Satanos mean?
Stand against.
To stand against. It calls him Diabolos. Diabolos. That's where we get the word devil, isn't it? What does the word the devil mean?
To run through.
It means to destroy, to kill. It means to cut through, to stab, to murder. All right. It calls him the liar. Pseudos. The liar. Now, all of these things we are related to, aren't we? You get angry. The Bible tells us, be angry, but sin not. Was Jesus angry?
Mm-hmm.
Did he ever get real mad?
Oh, yeah.
Did he ever hit anybody?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, just think, this is Jehovah God in flesh on earth. Did he get mad? Yes. Did he make a whip?
Yeah.
Who was he striking out against at that moment?
Oh, thank
People who were supposedly
Religion.
Yeah.
They were administrators in his kingdom, and they were doing it wrong. And he had given them plain instructions. All right, we've heard this story a lot of times, but it was what he was doing was repeating an ancient custom that they had repeated so many times. The word bank comes, we get our word bankrupt, which means busted. A bank is busted, all right? The bank's busted. But it went back to the pagan temples were places of banking. The priests were, some of them were administrators in this banking system that they had, and they were supposed to, people could come and put their money in that pagan temple. We're talking about paganism now. Big temples, Jupiter and everything, and people could take their money and then entrust their money to that priest, and he would be a good administrator of that money. And he was representing the whole kingdom. And he was supposed to make money with that money and then give these people interest, and when they needed that money, he was supposed to give it back to them. If this priest proved unworthy, he was to be publicly whipped. And his bank, or his bench, is what it was called. It was bankrupt, not bankrupt, because the bank was a table that was set out in that temple, and that's exactly what the Jews were repeating again. They had brought paganism right square into the temple of God, the temple area, and they were acting like a bunch of pagans out there. So Jesus took a custom that had been repeated all over the known world at that time and told them, you people are not worthy to be administrators in my kingdom, and I'm going to publicly whip you and turn over your bitches, and you are bankrupt. Your religion is no good. Done for. And Jesus told many parables against them, didn't he? The same story. The parable of the landowner. Who owns the universe? God. There was a certain landowner, he says, that had property, and he lent it out to sharecroppers. And the sharecroppers wouldn't pay him what was owed. So he sent his servants down to tell him, give me the money for the landowner. What did they do to him? They beat them. Some of them they killed. So he said, I'll send my only heir. And they said, oh, look here. Here comes the heir. Let's kill him and take all the inheritance of God. And what did the Jewish state say about Jesus and his following that he had, his little ecclesia that he was calling out in his ministry? What did they say about that, the Jewish state? This guy is jeopardizing our religion and our status in the government of Rome. Let's kill him. And we know that they knew that he was the Messiah. And what did Jesus say? There was a certain landowner. This landowner shared his world with these sharecroppers, didn't he? Now we're jumping ahead now. We have studied about Old Testament. Now we're coming into New Testament times. On your little chart. We come over here and we are coming up to the end of the law. This is the time that we're talking about. The time where God changed administrators in his kingdom because the old administrator was not worthy. What happened back here in Adam? Adam failed, didn't he? What happened over here when God told man to do good and offer blood sacrifices, and they lived under the age of conscience? What did man do there? They failed again, didn't they? What did God do to the world at this period of time? This was universal judgment, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Not only individual, but a universal judgment. What happened? The flood of the world. All right. Now, for hundreds of years, we find out that Enoch was preaching hundreds of years before Noah, wasn't he? What was he? Jude in the verses 14, 15, 16, and several other places, and I can see Enoch's writings throughout the New Testament in many books. He was a preacher of righteousness, wasn't he? What was going on in the world? Wickedness. He said, God's going to judge you. And then there was a son born that meant peace and safety. There was also one born named Methuselah. And what does Methuselah mean?
He is dead.
When he is dead, it shall come to pass. All right. Methuselah. When he was born to be a indicator, a sign. When he is dead, it shall come to pass. Every time he got sick, maybe, during his lifetime, they say there's a judgment of God coming. The very year that Methuselah died. Now, how long did Methuselah live? 969 years. For almost 1,000 years, God had been preaching to this same bunch of people. They wouldn't listen. 9 people made it on the other side of that flood, didn't they? 9 people. 8 of them in the ark. One of them on the outside of the ark that was caught up as Enoch. He didn't get killed by the flood either, did he? He was raptured because the flood also is a type of what?
Judgment.
It's a type of judgment also, but it's also a type of the return of Christ. Isn't that what the Lord said himself? As in the days of Noah, so shall be the coming of the Son of Man. All right. We see that. Well, the administration of God's kingdom was going to change. It was time. We go down through here, we saw human government. It failed. God had to divide the earth and confuse the languages to slow man down. Guess what? Where are we in the world today? There's 2,796 different language groupings and 960 basic language groups. And thousands of different language groups. Do you know that in the state of California, there were over 3,000 different tribes of Indians? And some of those tribes spoke 2 languages. One for the male and one for the females. They didn't communicate with each other the same thing today, people. And speak a different language. Have you ever said anything to your wife, said something that she thinks absolutely You know that she didn't hear what you said because she got mad. And wives, how many times have you done that with your husbands? Well, the American Indians here in California, they just decided to have two different languages, and these groups just don't talk to each other, and that cut down a lot of strife.
Good idea.
But there were 3,000 languages spoken, plus the masculine and feminine languages in those tribes. The world was real confused. And the God, it says, in the days of Peleg, and this is where the word Pharisee comes from, by the way. What's Pharisee mean? Separated and divided from the rest. All right? Many, many tekel upharsin. Remember that in the book of Daniel? All right? That upharsin means separated, divided. Okay, that's the old Pharisees. That's that word. All right? God divided the earth. That's how the Indians got over here. That's how the continents were made. As you see here, God divided them. The old continental drift theory, that's true. Except it drifted real fast. And if you find back out in history back then, they were not building big structures at that time. They had built one big structure, hadn't they? By the way, that tower was built in it, and Hebrew is completed. That tower wasn't in the process of being made, it was finished, and God destroyed that and divided this earth, and nobody lived in houses for a while, because God told them to do what anyway? Be nomadic, scatter throughout the earth. Tread the earth down, walk it down, is what he says. Okay? Well, judgment is what we see. God was forcing man to not, God said, he said, if we don't do something with these dudes, he said, we are going to have problems with them. They're going to tear up the whole world. Guess where we are in time and space right now? Right back where we were here at the language problem. One time in history, God undivided the languages at one period of time. He told his little church, he said, you stay right here in Jerusalem until you're endowed with power on high and coming back. He said, I can't stay with you because I can't be with every church everywhere it's going to go in the world. But the Holy Spirit will come and I'll be with you through that. You stay here until that comes. And when Peter and those preached on the day of Pentecost, what happened? Now think. What happened? Every man heard what they said in their own native language. Now all of them spoke what? One language. The universal language, which is Koine Greek. All of them spoke Koine Greek. But in their own countries, in their own districts, and their own dialects, they were hearing these people speak in their own language. God unconfused the languages there momentarily. What was that? That was a miracle. That's what it was. There were a whole bunch of people saved, weren't they? Sure were. Well, back over here in this law age, Jesus did everything that he could do. God did everything that was absolutely necessary for Israel to accept their Messiah King. They knew when he was born. Why, even those magi over there in the schools that Daniel had left behind in Babylon, they knew when the Messiah was going to be born. And they came looking for him. It was right. It was time. It was the year and the month and the time. Israel should have known the same thing. But who was on the throne? Esau. Esau was on the throne, wasn't he? Of Israel. Not Jacob. Not Jacob's line, but Esau's line. That imposter. Did Herod know he was an imposter? Do you think every highfalutin Pharisee knew who was on the throne of Israel? Do you think they were dummies when it came to lineages? Why, that was one of the favorite things to tell them. They sat around and tell who you were born from and this and here and so on and so forth. You look at the book of Luke and look at the book of Matthew. All right? You would see that. Here we come wandering up here to the New Testament time, and the Old Testament, what does that mean? The old contract, the old covenant. Now, by the way, there were a bunch of old covenants, weren't there? Not just one. God made this covenant with Adam, didn't he? Adam broke it. God made a new covenant with his descendants. They broke it. God made another covenant. Then he made a covenant with Abram. Abram. Exalted father. That's what his name meant, exalted. Abram. Then he changed his name to Abraham. That little eem on the end of that. See that? That eem is what in Hebrew? Plural. Exalted father of many. Okay? And he made an unconditional, all these other ones were conditional covenants, weren't they? They depended on what? What they did. This covenant was an unconditional covenant. And what is an unconditional covenant? Come on, what's an unconditional covenant?
One that can't be changed.
One that can't be changed. It's what you call an immutable covenant. You know why that God is putting up with Israel today?
Conditional covenant.
Why Luther tried to get the whole Jewish race killed. Did you know that? He called for the destruction of all the Jews in his time when he started preaching. Luther said that every Jew ought to be put in a concentration camp someplace, every male neutered, and every female not ever to be able to produce a child. Because they were the killers of the Messiah. And that race of people, and God was finished with Israel, and he would never deal with them again, and they needed to be wiped off the face of this earth. And of course, when Hitler came on the scene, all he did was just took up with Luther's preaching. How many of you know that? Because his theology wasn't quite right. God does have a purpose. And he had an immutable contract with this guy, Abram. No matter what those descendants have done, he is going to bring glory through that nation one of these days. And that's the whole idea of the tribulation period, is to beat them into submission. And the only reason why the Jews are in the world in existence today is by the promise of God and his omnipotence. Because Satan, if he could destroy, if he could have used Luther, if Satan could have used Luther to really destroy national Israel, the promises of God would have been nullified. If Hitler could have destroyed all the Jewish people off the face of the earth, he could have proved God a liar, couldn't he? Because God didn't stand behind Abraham's covenant. Now, there's a double part of that covenant. Actually, we're of the seed of Abraham because we're of the seed of the Messiah. But Israel is still there, too. How are they doing out there?
They're still busy.
They're still busy, huh? Still preaching. Okay. How many of you putting some things together? Is it coming together for you? It makes sense, doesn't it? God is not a God of foolishness. It's a God of... We were talking about physical science. God lays his eternal purposes, and they are from eternity to eternity. And there's no mistakes in between. Man has failed God many times, but there's one man that did not fail. The God-man. All right, he showed us how to do it. He is our example. In the law of God, God was the point, Israel was to be pointed to the coming Messiah King. Weren't they? Is that about to flop over?
Not yet.
Not yet. Almost. Israel was supposed to be pointed to the Messiah King, and when he came, they were very happy with their religion. Not the common man. Did you know that? What was the common man? There was a widow out there that cast in two of the smallest denomination of Israeli coins, which was called the mite. It took two of them to make the next smallest one. They were just basically worth nothing. You couldn't buy much with that. Maybe a slice of stale, or half a slice of stale bread. And Jesus was not a mean man, was he? If he'd have been mean, what? He would have been ungodly, wouldn't he? Was he perfectly sinless? Did everything he said Did he tell the truth? Well, he said that this woman out there, this widow, and remember, Pharisees were around when he said this. He said, that woman over there gave more than all the rest. She gave more than all the rest. Now, what do you think those Pharisees said? I gave $500 today. What do you mean? She only gave it to little smallest denominations of coin. What is he talking about? He said, because they, over there, gave their excess. Their excess. Matter of fact, I'm going to give my excess here. Have this put in there. I forgot about it. They gave above their, all of them were eating. This woman wasn't eating. She didn't have enough money to buy food. Every one of them had breakfast that day and lunch, and were going to have plans for dinner. But that woman, that money was going to buy the only morsel of food that she had and could eat that day. But she put it all in the deal, because that's all she had. That's what you call sacrificial giving. Our church calls us to give sacrificially, doesn't it? Is that unreasonable? No, because we have an example in the Bible. This poor widow, name will be remembered forever because of what she did. There was a harlot in the Bible called Mary. Mary evidently was lucrative in her business because she had wealth. She had ointment, and she had her tear bottle. And just think about that for a while. What she had given to Jesus. She anointed him with his fragrance, perfume, and she poured her tears on his feet and dried his feet with her hair, the hair of her head. Now, there's figures of speech involved in here too. Now, she was probably crying also. But Hebrews are very emotional people. They're what you call of the Eastern thought. And many of those people at that time, or all of the women, by the way, women have got unusual ways, don't they, men? And women say that about men too. But you know, when a woman would go to a wedding or a funeral, they would have a tear bottle with them. And they would catch some of those tears in that tear bottle, and they would put it in a bottle and cork it. And when they were buried, all of the joys of life and all of the sorrows of life were buried with them in remembrance of their whole life. Many Bible scholars think that Mary took that tear bottle and poured that on his feet too. All of everything, all the joys, all the miseries of life, she poured at Jesus' feet. Because he was now her master. And how many of you know what a hair bowl is? A hair bowl. B-O-W-L.
No,
Women used to sit in front of the mirror and they would comb their hair, and the hair that would come out of their head, they would put it in a hair bowl. They'd stuff it in this little bowl. If you go into some museums, you'll see hair bowls sitting around on vanities. And the women would braid their hair and make little cloth placemats. They would braid their hair and make it. And if you watch the outlaw Josie Wales, that girl braided a watch fob and from her hair and gave it to this man she was in love with. And that's what women would do. They would give us, and sometimes they would put gold and silver in these cloths. Maybe Mary took that cloth and wiped his feet with it also with the hair of her head and with that cloth that meant nothing to her. The Bibles and customs and manners. You can learn a lot from that. You can't study the Word of God and language without studying history and what those people did back then. One of the books that's really good if you want to study things like this is Jesus the Messiah by Alfred Eversheim. It's the customs of the times of that time, and then study all the language things. You can't study one word in Greek without going back and finding out how it was used, or in Hebrew either one. You've got to be a student of history to do that. And when you study history, sometimes there is so much more meaning to those things than just what is read on the surface. Remember when we first started this class today, I said, how many of you read through the whole Bible? It's like passing by scriptures and verses and hearing them, but not hearing them. hearing them but not hearing them. And then you turn the light on one word and you look at it. And you walk all the way around that word and you look at it. That hair that that woman used to dry Jesus' feet, and those tears, I'm sure she was crying too, but I do believe that she broke that tear bottle and put her whole life at his feet and her whole being right there. Because from that time on, that woman was changed. Wasn't she? And what was she? Nothing but a harlot. That's all. Just a harlot. There was another Mary that did the same thing too. I think she copied what the other Mary did. And that was Mary and Martha. All right, there was two of them that did that. That was a double happening. One of them, I believe, the harlot did. And then I believe Mary did that also.
That Mary Magdalene?
Mary Magdalene. And then Mary and Martha and Lazarus. That was the other. They were friends of Jesus that lived in Bethany, remember? Over there, that's Lazarus is the one that he raised from the dead. And just think about that, too. Remember what Jesus said to her when he was speaking to her. If you had been here, my brother would have not died. And he said, he told her what? What did Jesus tell her? Mary and Martha, when he was speaking to them. He said, I am the resurrection. And she believed in the resurrection because she said, I know that in the last day that he will stand. That's what we're talking about over here. After this tribulation period, this resurrection of the living dead, by the way. Not the thanatos, but the necros. All right, the necros means dead bodies. The thanatos means death is separated forever. Okay, two different Greek words, two different ideas. Well, I know that he'll stand in the resurrection again. And then Jesus said what? He cried with a loud voice and said, Lazarus, come forth. Come to me. That is the same voice that we're going to hear one of these days when we either are raptured or we come out of our graves. What's going on out there? Time yet? Or they're what? They're still preaching? Are you sure they're still? What is he? Is he wound up today, Brother John? Me too. It don't matter, I'll improvise. Anyway, thank you for your attention. I'm going to turn it back over to Brother Greg so he'll have a few minutes. We got some prayer requests up here.
Tony,
Thank you for. Yes, brother.
You said we were talking to the lady the other day. She had the Star of David on her. And
We know where our cross comes from, but where does the Star of David come from?
The Star of David comes from the Old Testament. It's really an old signia, and it represented at one time the promises of God to David and the Messiah. All right, it was
that
that's where
star in heaven that they followed.
that represents that also. But it was not so much a star in heaven, but the right time. It was the right kairos, the right season for him to be born. All right, that was the stars line up, and what do you do with the stars? Tell time and direction, and it was time for the Messiah to be born. The stars were right.
So God gave David the star. And
Oh, he just-
that's what they use as their...
As their deal. Yeah, it was that was an insignia. And if you look at the different tribes, they had different, in the four directions from the tabernacle, they had different things, but in different tribes, they had different, in their families, they also had different little things that they handed down. Brother Gray, I'm going to turn it to you.
Bill, thank you for copying prayer request. Can we update our prayer sheet from last week? We want to leave Rita on here. Bill, do you have an update on that? Rita, first one.
Oh, Rita? Yeah, last I heard, she's still hanging in there. I think it's gonna be probably sometime soon. I don't know how she's gonna last as long as she has.
Okay, how's Terry doing?
If you could put down on there, not only his family, but his salvation, Terry's salvation. It says Terry for his family and their salvation, but it's really for Terry's salvation
Okay.
and his family's.
All right, is Emilio still traveling?
He's here somewhere.
Okay, we'll leave him on. He's going to be traveling, right?
Yeah, that's what my brother just wanted to get ready to leave.
And I see an update on Jim. Jim, let's see, you're still waiting to
Too
take
sick
the
to
test.
take the test.
Okay. How's Dakota doing?
She's doing a little better. That she did have to go be with her birth mother this weekend, so that's
Okay.
not good. I hope she's all right when she comes home.
Okay, Marilyn, how are you doing?
Oh, I'm
Phil-
good, boy. I'm doing
You
better.
doing
She
okay?
still needs your prayer with her breathing, though.
Okay, we'll leave those in. And Lee's not here today? Okay, we'll leave. Did I get that right? Hernando Elaine is the sister-in-law of a coworker who has cancer, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I haven't heard that much about it, so.
Okay.
It's in the early stages.
Okay. Christy will leave your son Stephen on.
Yes.
Okay. And Bill's coworker Connie, how's Connie doing? Bill?
You know what, I don't see a change, and we didn't get a chance to talk this last week, both of us were so busy, but I know this work will provide another opportunity for us to find time to talk.
Okay. Ken, how's your grandfather doing?
Same.
Okay. And let's see, Hernandez's request for Michelle's father.
I haven't seen her. She's out of town, but when I talked to her last time,
Okay.
she said.
We will. Did I have this one right, Tony and Hernando, with your daughter? She's learning to drive, right? She's a young driver?
She's got her license now,
Okay.
and she's out on the road by herself.
Okay.
Eh,
They say
And
it
is she
takes,
the one that's getting married? No, it's the
my
boy.
son's getting married.
Son's getting married.
they say it takes several years for a person to learn to drive. You get your license, but that doesn't mean you know how to drive.
Yeah, that's right, that's what I told her.
My daughter's
Keep telling
24,
her.
and she's not, I want to tell her next time I get to drive with her about this. It used to be on the driver's test that you should leave 1 car length per every 10 miles an hour of the car in front of you. And she's driving 50 miles an hour, 2 car lengths away from the car in front of her. But anyway, that's the way they do it these days.
Maybe she needs glasses.
She needs glasses?
Further away than she is.
She may have to
Maybe she needs to slow down.
Yeah.
Good cover.
And let's see, Anna's not here, we can leave.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
right.
there's that.
Hi, Anna.
Yeah, can we leave him on there?
Yes, we will. I think we want to try to visit your mom, Bill and I, this weekend. Okay. And new requests, Charlie's to pray for his wife and family. Okay. Who requested for a bit? Jim?
Here.
Yes, Charlie Stokes. He was my uncle by marriage, and he died this week. And please remember his wife and his family, and the opportunity I had to witness to some of them, and that they'll carry some of that home. Whether there's some come all the way from Mississippi.
Okay. And who requested prayer for Bill Good?
I did. He's a friend of mine that had cancer, and he was wanting to get a hold of me. And I think he wanted to hear about the Lord, and I told him about the Lord the other day too. I talked to him some time with him, witnessing to him and everything, and it was a good visit. And I'm going to do it some more.
Excellent.
Jim Lemaire's wife has breast cancer and it's gone to her lungs.
Okay. Is that Katie? Is that
Laura,
Oh, Laura. Let's see, Kevin is losing his eyesight.
No, he has.
Oh, he has.
Yeah, he is legally blind.